What's up, YouTube? So, in this video, I want to talk about the Miami Dolphins defensive linemen going into the 2023 offseason. I have linebackers pulled up, too, just because guys like Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips are technically linebackers according to Spot even though they're edge rushers. But, whatever. But I'm not going to be talking about people like Duke Riley, Channing Tindall, Jerome Baker. I'm not going to be talking about our actual linebackers. But starting up here, Emmanuel Ogbah, who did get hurt this year. We have him for another 3 years locked up. Hopefully he can really come in next year and show that he is still a very talented player, very good run stopper, and can give you some value as a pass rusher. Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, and Raekwon we all have for next year at least, but we are going to have to re-sign them after next year if we want to keep them. Christian Wilkins has to be one of the top priorities on this team. I really, really want to keep him. He's probably my favorite player on the Dolphins right now. Not necessarily the best, but my personal favorite. And he's a big-time leader for this defense as well. Zach Sealer, very, very underrated player. I love these two as a pair. Both very good run stoppers that give you value as a pass rusher as well. Raekwon Davis, I'm happy we at least have for another year, but I'm not trying to re-sign him unless he wants to stay for cheap. But I am happy we at least have him for 2023. Bronson and Twyman, honestly, they're camp bodies and some training camp guys, and probably some practice squad guys. I do like the physical gifts that Jalen Twyman has as a potential 3-tech if we do switch to a 4-3. But that's about it. Trey Flowers and John Jenkins. Trey Flowers really didn't even play for us much because of the injury. He can just kind of walk. John Jenkins we've had for basically a year and a half, and he's been here before. I think we can finally just let him go. I think we can go get a cheap nose tackle to kind of back up Raekwon Davis if we need to. But I don't think we really need to do too much there. Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer can both play one tech in a pinch. We've seen them do it, so it's really not that big a deal. Edge rushers, Bradley Chubb, we have for a long time, so there's that. He didn't really have a great year with us this year, but honestly, we traded for him halfway through the year. He didn't really know our system too well. I'm hoping that after an offseason with us, he can show why he was a first-round pick at one point and why we traded for him. He hasn't finished a season in a very long time, which is concerning. But hopefully we get Vic Fangio. He can kind of help unlock Bradley Chubb. He has coached him before, so there is that. Yeah. Jalen Phillips we still have for another 2 years at least, and we have a 5th-year option for him because he was a first-round pick. I am hoping to be able to sign him at that point if he's still on track because he had a very good rookie season and a very good second year as well. Love these two edge rushers along with Ogbah. Cameron Good is a guy that plays edge and like Sam linebacker. We didn't really get a chance to really see him play much this year. Actually, really at all. I don't even think he hit the active roster at any point. I don't think. But I'll talk about him more in the linebacker video when I do that. The last two I really want to talk about is Melvin Ingram and Andrew Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel is kind of like Cameron Good. He does play edge as well as linebacker, but he is more of an edge rusher. Van Ginkel's been pretty good for us considering he was a 7th-round pick for us, I believe. Was it 6th? I'm pretty sure it was 7th a few years ago. Pretty underrated player. I wouldn't mind keeping him if he's willing to sign for relatively cheap. He's a guy that can play a couple different positions for us and is a solid enough player. So if he is willing to sign for cheap, I wouldn't mind keeping him. But he might be better off going somewhere where he can be a better part of the rotation. And since we're switching defensive coordinators, I personally would like to run a 4-3. And I don't know how well Andrew Van Ginkel really fits that scheme, so it is what it is. But we also don't know who we're actually going to hire or if we will switch to a 4-3 or not. Who knows? Melvin Ingram, kind of same thing. We signed him this year. The first half of his season was very good. He kind of fell off toward the end of the season a little bit. But he's still a pretty solid player, especially as a rotation piece. He's getting up there in age, so you kind of have to manage his snaps a little bit. But honestly, if he wanted to sign like another year for fairly cheap, I wouldn't mind keeping him around at all. The idea of Melvin Ingram, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, and Emmanuel Ogbah going into the offseason as our edge rushers, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind that. And then maybe drafting a guy in the later rounds or something if we really wanted to. But I think that's also fine. So, yeah. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, appreciate hitting that like button. Have any questions or comments in the comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.